Many women over 55 do not realize this, but there are important conversations that need your attention. And most of the time, these conversations do not happen until the concern becomes a bigger issue. We are hearing more about brain health, memory loss, dementia, and cognitive decline. Yet very few families have proactive conversations before the situation escalates. And when changes in behavior are noted more frequently, the conversations become more emotional, uncomfortable, and even frightening, and are sometimes avoided altogether. Today's conversation is about changing that. Welcome to Beyond the Glass Slipper, the podcast and community for women over 55 who are ready to redefine aging, reframe life, and step intentionally into their encore. I'm your host, Cindy, and having been a speech-language pathologist who has worked extensively with adult patients and their family navigating cognitive and neurological changes and challenges, I find this conversation deeply personal and professionally important. Today's guest is Dana Serrano. She is a physical therapist and the founder of Gait Mechanics, a specialized in-home therapy practice that focuses on movement, mobility, cognitive wellness, and helping individuals maintain independence and quality of life throughout the aging process. I also had the great privilege of working for Dana professionally. I saw firsthand her deep commitment to helping individuals maintain dignity, independence, and quality of life while assisting the family who needed her help as much as the patient. The demand for the type of service Dana's company provides is growing, and she is meeting that need as quickly as possible. Her staff has now grown to over 50 therapists to support her mission, a mission that has personal roots as well. Not only does Dana have years of clinical experience, but she also has extensive personal experience as a caregiver. Her dad suffered from ALS, and her mother was diagnosed with early onset dementia. What makes today's conversation so powerful is that Dana believes we need to stop waiting for further decline and start supporting people earlier with more education, more resources, more compassion, and a greater focus on maintaining quality of life for as long as possible. In this episode, we hope to provide women in their encore years with the information they need to make this difficult situation more manageable. The message today is clear. These conversations should no longer be delayed when subtle signs begin to emerge. So let's start the conversation. Dana, welcome to Beyond the Glass Slipper. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm so honored to be here.
So this topic feels incredibly timely. Just yesterday at my Toastmasters meeting, I met a woman who was sharing with me a story about her mother's decline. She's only in her 70s right now. Her mother is at that phase of being in denial that everything is okay. She's probably secretly asking herself some things, and had a conversation recently with her primary care physician when she went for her annual checkup. The patient evidently expressed some concern, and the doctor told her that she was doing well and really had nothing to worry about if she was able to drive herself home safely. Recall the route home. I know how you and I would feel about that comment. And now the daughter is struggling because mother has this seal of approval that she's doing okay and doesn't want to hear what the daughter has to say. And I know that you have run into this so many times. What are your thoughts on this?
Great question. I think this really epitomizes what we're going through as a society and our healthcare system as a whole. So while I wouldn't recommend panicking if we're having some issues or some cognitive changes, I would also recommend getting a second opinion in these instances. We live in a day and a time where we're very fortunate to have a pretty robust level of support now in the community where we didn't before. That said, I believe that our healthcare system is really built on a very antiquated format where dementia and cognitive impairment does not meet the conversation in the way that it needs to. And unfortunately, a lot of our primary care physicians, especially if they've been in practice for a long time, perhaps didn't have the opportunity to have the training that a lot of our newer primary care physicians, neurologists, and other practitioners do now. So I would first start by saying, if there's any doubt that there's something going on, Definitely look into it and find either a neurologist or a facility that is a little bit more specialized in this department. I think that we have really come a long way. I'm thrilled and excited to see the evolution that is taking place. That said, we have a really long way to go.
I agree with that. I think there are so many families that are truly trying to figure this whole thing out and just trying to get a handle on what normal aging is and what deserves attention, how to begin to find the support that they need. How do they make that next step from, I think mom or dad has something going on, and how can I convince them to get the help that they need? You have any insight on that one?
Yes. So I think that oftentimes there's a lot of shame and fear, anxiety surrounding memory impairment. So I first like to start by saying just because we're having some impairment does not mean that we have dementia, nor does it mean that we have a diagnosed issue. It could very well be something that's age associated, or it could be something entirely different that has nothing to do with the dementia diagnosis. It could be an infection. It can be a change in medication, a change in sleeping habits. It could be hormones. There could be so many other things. And I think that that has to be ruled out first and foremost. That said, obviously, we do know that there are a lot of people out in the community that have a diagnosis, perhaps brewing. And our system previously was not set up to address what we would call subclinical diagnostics. So, not to get too deep in the weeds here, but I'm a physical therapist by trade. I am not a neuropsychologist. I'm not a speech language pathologist, and I'm certainly not a neurologist. But even in my little corner of the world, I can tell you that for those that have a cognitive impairment or dementia diagnosis, one of the early signs that we always do see is what we call an apraxia. An apraxia is something that presents as a loss of balance, lack of heel straight when you're walking. So it does, in fact, look like there might be a little bit of a balance disorder going on because, again, when we have either vascular dementia or issues with Alzheimer's, those areas of the brain that are affected by memory typically are the first things that come to fruition. But that doesn't mean that other areas aren't being affected and don't have evidence of some dysfunction going on. So oftentimes, our patients that have dementia and Alzheimer's will have issues with falls, tripping, balance, all of these other issues, motor planning impairments, well before they actually self report that memory issues are going on. And these are all things that are now coming to the forefront that perhaps we don't have to look at the model as it was, that these patients will say, oh, I'm forgetting my name. I forgot why I walked into this room. I forgot how to get back from the doctor's office to my house. These may no longer be the things that are going on. And oftentimes, the practitioners that are with these patients for long periods of time, your physical therapist, your occupational therapist, are the ones that are going to pick up on these things. When you go to a doctor and you're dressed up, you have your makeup on, you look put together, you're smiling, you're cracking jokes, we can easily mask some of the issues that might be taking place. And oftentimes, if you get a practitioner, a primary care physician, a doctor that doesn't perhaps have the right tools and training, they may easily just slough it off to aging.
Right. Yeah. So, Dana, when many people hear terms like mild cognitive impairment, dementia, they immediately become fearful or they feel a sense of hopelessness. You believe we need to completely rethink that response. What do you wish people would understand first when cognitive changes begin affecting them or someone they love?
Think that the diagnosis does not always equal the outcome in a nutshell. And that's a pretty powerful statement. But truthfully, if someone goes to a doctor and they get diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, that does not mean they have dementia. And the truth is that there are many things that we can do to thwart that decline into a diagnosis of dementia. And unfortunately, the way that our healthcare system was set up previously is here is the diagnosis, eat a healthy Mediterranean diet, make sure you drink lots of water, reduce your stress, get lots of sleep, see you next year. I don't know about you, but that would send me home into an emotional spiral if I were that person. And it would leave me feeling quite helpless that anything could be done. Nothing was offered as a resource to say, these are the things that can be done to prevent this disorder from becoming worse. And now we understand that there is not one silver bullet. maybe there is no cure, but there are certainly things that could improve our quality of life and, in many circumstances, halt the decline and the speed in which this disorder might take over much faster. We've had many patients on caseload that had been told they were going to have moderate to severe dementia progression within a couple of years. And with the right physical therapy, the right neurologist administering medication, the right stress reduction, and the right cognitive rehabilitation program to keep them sharp, man, what a big difference that made, not only for them, but in addition to have some supportive services for the caregiver to really explain what these symptoms might look like. It may not just be, I forgot this person's name. I forgot to show up at the doctor's office yesterday. These issues can present very differently as personality changes and other things that we would not have normally expected them to look like.
You're really looking more as a proactive approach, that the diagnosis is not, if you will, a death sentence, and that there are things that you can do other than just go home, follow your Mediterranean diet, and I'll see you in a year. Can you explain what Gait Mechanics, under your direction, what does your company do to help prolong the quality of life for these individuals?
Thank you, Cindy. So, on the back end, clinical support, which is myself and my administrative dementia care team, we are following up with the family, the caregivers, the patients themselves in a lot of instances to provide community resources. We're very, very blessed and lucky to have fantastic community partners. And our goal, even if they don't do therapy with us, is to ensure that they have some guidance and direction within this platform and community. Very overwhelming, especially in the front of a diagnosis. But most importantly, if someone has just received, let's say, a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment, this is a terrific place to start. And in years past, this was a place where most healthcare providers might say, well, it's only mild, so go home and do some puzzles, get on luminosity, do again, eat your Mediterranean diet, we'll see you in a year. To me, that's not good enough. I think if I'm a patient with some sort of cognitive impairment, I would like someone to give me a little bit more of a handhold through this journey to say, it's going to be okay. And we are going to give you objective data to show you how. So we would pair them with, usually, if they have a mild cognitive impairment diagnosis, the first step is a speech language pathologist. And speech language pathologists, Cindy, as you know, get a very bad rap for being called speech therapists. This is not just a speech therapist working on speech. This therapist, as you know, is going to work on short-term memory strategies with the patient and their loved ones to help improve all aspects of memory. So short-term memory, problem solving, critical thinking skills, executive functioning, name finding, word recall, overall brain health. This is a massive player to come in at this very high level stage and really execute all of the different things that we can to make sure that this person stays strong mentally and then continues to improve. And the way that we do that through this Brain Boost program is every 10 visits, there is a reassessment. So there's a test that's given to really take a look at functional aspects of memory and how it presents. And every 10 visits, that is reassessed. So now you have a baseline, a written baseline of how you're doing, and follow-up assessments to decide how that baseline looks. Are you improving? Are you the same? Are you getting worse? And that program will be tailored and adjusted to make sure that we are doing everything in our power to make that initial improvement and try our best to keep them there to the best of our abilities. Again, this is our little corner of it, but it really makes a difference, not just in the mental sharpness, but emotionally, to know that you're working towards something important.
Is that bi-directional feed between what came first, forget about the chicken and the egg, what came first, the depression or the cognitive impairment, and they feed into each other. So you just hit on something very important. Internally, these people are struggling, and so may come out now as anxiety or depression or something else. And what I think the message that I would love to get across is that a company like yours can provide them with the therapy, the intervention that they need to ward off the rate for further decline. And it doesn't have to go from mild cognitive impairment to dementia. I loved when I would meet my patients at the library. If you can get these success stories out to individuals that think they don't need the help, I feel if you miss that window of opportunity, you may be really missing out. Would you agree with that?
agree 100%. And you hit the nail on the head about going back to the chicken or the egg scenario. We do know that anxiety and depression can cause dementia related disorders. However, we also are not aware as to how much is going on prior to the diagnosis occurring. So, my mother is one of those situations. She passed this in November. It was 18
Yes,
years that
your
she had
loss.
Alzheimer's, 18 years. And I will never know what came first, but I suspect that perhaps the executive functioning loss might have been what had spiked her anxiety as the initial symptom. Her anxiety was so high that she actually stopped functioning altogether. Not to get into specifics, but it was so challenging to watch. And her short term memory was intact. And that's the piece that I think is really important for others to understand. So I do reflect quite a bit and wonder how much of that executive functioning, which basically means for those that are watching, the
Thank you.
ability to organize your day, your thoughts, what do you do after breakfast? How do you get from point A to point B? All of the decision points, those judgment decision points that you have to make through the day that most of us do without any thought at all. If that unraveled on me right now, I think the next emotion I would feel outside of confusion is sheer terror. And I'll be honest with you, that is what I saw with her. And we were trying so hard to address the psychological, emotional component that I think we missed what was hiding underneath it. So when she got that Alzheimer's diagnosis, it all clicked into place. And while she may not have been a candidate for my Brain Boost program with a speech therapist, she was not receptive to it. She was living on her own and would have done remarkably well with an occupational therapist coming in for memory and motion. And for those who are not aware of that program, occupational therapy doesn't have to be just can they dress or feed themselves. Occupational therapy with Gait Mechanics is are their clothes sitting wet in the dryer for 4 days? Is there expired food in the refrigerator? Has the stove been left on? Can they use their phone? Can they call 911? Can they turn on the TV with their remote? And in all of those instances with my mother, the answer was no, she couldn't.
Yeah.
So these were very big challenges that even as a physical therapist, I missed because it was very close to me and she was living on her own. So that is
Yeah.
a piece that can come in terms of our program as well.
When you talk about cognitive support and maintaining independence, what therapies, routines, and interventions are you referring to, and how can they help someone continue functioning at the highest level possible for a longer period of time?
I think the physical therapy coming in and making sure that the mobility is intact is one piece, but the combination of the speech therapy coming in for strategy and the occupational therapy coming in for function to support the patient is key. But even more importantly than that, I will take it one step beyond that as that progression continues, if it does continue. The next piece is caregiver education. And I don't care if you have a doctorate degree, if you're a physician yourself. Again, I missed it. Everybody is different. And to have a supportive therapeutic individual to come in and say, your husband is doing this not because he's trying to be difficult, but
Right.
because he doesn't have the cognition to really comprehend what's happening. He's not lazy. These are the cues that you need to get him to go from point A to point B without a battle, get him into the shower without a fight. There's really just so much that we're missing in this category.
I agree. And those caregivers, they need just as much support as the patient themselves because they're dealing with it 24/7. If they can't take care of themselves and continue to function at a high level, added stress of having to deal with someone that they don't understand the whys and wherefores of their behavior, that it's a situation that's not good for the patient or the caregiver. So that caregiver education is so unbelievably important. I appreciate the fact that you brought that up, Dana. Thank you. And so, as you have shared, you not only lived with these scenarios professionally, but personally as well. What would you say to the family member listening right now who feels overwhelmed, exhausted, frightened, or unsure how to help someone they love?
I think the first thing to know that they should do that there's two steps. One is to get a proper diagnosis. So if you know something is going on with a loved one and there is someone blowing it off, primary care physician, a healthcare practitioner, Not trying to knock on primary care, that's just the example. We have some really wonderful primary care out there. Then they need to go to a second opinion to get the proper diagnosis. The second piece, and this is really where I come in, is to make sure that they're getting the right support. That support can be making sure they're going to caregiver support groups, or as I've been discussing, our program is really geared for providing support not just to the patient, but to the caregiver. We really need to shift our focus, at least from the therapy realm, from coming in and just doing 3 sets of 10. This is the exercise we're going to do. We're going to bill Medicare and we're going to get out, to looking at the full entire holistic scope of the person, providing the support and the education to the caregiver, even if it's something as simple as, we know that this is what happens with Bob when he has a UTI. Maybe he needs to go back to the doctor. These are the things that you can do to cue him, not arguing with the patient, agreeing with some of their realities that maybe are not the reality that you know. There are so many tricks that can reduce the rate of stress and burden for the caregiver that we can support in the home.
That's valuable because the patient quality of life will increase when they're managed without them feeling like being managed. Does that make sense?
100%. And sometimes we don't need that buy-in. I always say we have 2 categories of a patient. One is the one that's proactive and is trying to get ahead of it, and they're going to do great. But then on the other side, as that diagnosis and disease progresses, we have a whole system in place, very familiar and very similar to what happened back in the 70s with hospice. I use that as an example. Back in the 70s, hospice became a thing. It was not something that was widely acknowledged prior as it was launching. Most of the healthcare providers said, why would we have a supportive therapeutic nursing system come into the home to support those with the terminal diagnosis? They're terminal. This is no different. Our patients may have a cognitive diagnosis. They're still alive. They still have a life. They have a family. This is where these supportive services come in. Absolutely.
That's excellent. So that the audience fully understands the type of services that you provide is that you stay with the patient, just like hospice stays with the patient for as long as they need to. Services and evaluations continue to be updated, and the current level of function continues to be evaluated, and their level of services, it increases as the patient needs it, again, with the long-term focus of giving this patient the best quality of life. Is that correct?
100%. Our goal is the 2 pieces is to have them on caseload with us. So they have our supportive administrative staff checking in to make sure that all of their needs are met from a resource standpoint. And then in addition, the best part is that our staff, once they are paired with our patient for physical, occupational, and speech therapy, they stay with that patient long term so that they develop that rapport, the continuity year round, uninterrupted.
When you said the physical therapist goes in and says, okay, we're going to do 3 sets of this, and that's not at all what your company does. And that is so refreshing, with a little bit of education on services for our loved ones or even ourselves, but getting the right services. We want substance. We want to know that they're targeting the right needs that need to be addressed. I know that your company does that, but I know that you've expanded the program since I've left, which is so exciting.
We're thrilled. And I really do think that the continuity of care is really where this is at. We've had tremendous objective data to show that we have prevented falls, hospitalizations. We're minimally going over the cap, if at all, for the year for therapy services. And the best part is that these caregivers and family members know they can call us at the drop of a hat to find out what the next step is. We're communicating with their primary care, with their neurology team. We really do need to expand our platform and take back our resources, our community, to provide what's needed for these patients. And I believe the biggest piece of what's missing in our community, at least from the therapy standpoint, is yes, we can do all of these exercises and activities. We can do community reintegration. We are educators, and that is what we went to school for, is to provide the education and support to our community. And without that education, these caregivers, patients, and families are lost.
That is so true. So I just want to check my notes here, because we want to make sure that we're hitting on all the important points. One of the most powerful things you just shared is your vision for being more proactive and providing the support along that spectrum, wherever that patient's journey may be taking them. Can you explain what you hope changes in the future when it comes to Medicare, cognitive wellness services, and earlier support for quality of life? What is your big hope for the future?
My big hope for the future is that our program, it's our proprietary program, is called Cognicare, Cognitive Care Program, is that there will be some formal benefits through Medicare to allow some safety for this group of patients throughout the year without any issues. So there are, not to get too deep into the weeds, lots of changes with Medicare billing and reimbursement, but I really believe that through our program, we would love to take this to a national level. So there are formal benefits for those with a cognitive diagnosis, ongoing services and support for these patients. We don't wait for them to fall. We don't wait for them to completely forget. We don't wait for them to get into the car accident. I find that as a whole, our community in healthcare really waits for the things to get bad before there's a real issue. I would like to make sure that we do have proper benefits, formal benefits for our patients with cognitive impairment so that they do have ongoing supportive services with the right personnel, the right healthcare professionals that have the background to really support this community.
Dana, would you agree that it's mild cognitive impairment that is falling more through the cracks and not getting the services, or is it the whole spectrum?
There are deficits throughout the whole spectrum, but they're different. In the category of mild cognitive impairment, we're missing the boat because it's not bad enough, and we need that early intervention preventive model to kick in, which is what we do. On the other end, I've had lots of healthcare professionals ask me when the patient is in the moderate to severe stage, what is therapy going to do? What are you going to play bingo with them and Scrabble with them and you're going to bill Medicare for that? We are working on all of the things that we can to prevent them from either incurring further decline and as well as providing caregiver support, but we're doing it through creative means. So to the bystander, it may look like we're doing something fun, but that allows us access to the patient to develop that rapport and to continue to move forward with therapy services. So I think on both ends of the spectrum, we either have they're not bad enough or they're too bad. How are you going to help? I say no to both of that. I think that you have the right therapist who's trained properly. Even in the event that the patient might not be able to retain information, we don't have to do therapy three times a week. We can literally come in once every 3 months and check in with the caregiver, reassess the patient, and screen for any issues that might create a hospitalization, a fall, overwhelm with the caregiver to continue to have the patient age in place safely.
What I hear with the mildly impaired patient or starting to notice changes in decline is that some of these changes are first noticed by family members. The patient probably are noticing it too because they're using defense mechanisms to get around it, and they're using a lot of jokes and whatever compensatory strategies they have developed on their own to not let their loved ones and people around them know the decline they're experiencing. The case in point of this woman last night, she is a psychotherapist herself, and she has this mom in her 70s who's living alone and driving, but is showing up sometimes 2 or 3 days late a family event because she's really having a hard time with executive function. How do we get those individuals do we instruct the caregiver to go to the professional and put it in their hands? How do we start that process? And that's something I struggled with as well.
Good question. And honestly, I will tell you that most of the patients and families that we speak to, when they call me, the first thing they'll say is, I know you may not be used to this, but I don't know if my husband is going to be okay with this. So I'll say I've had 9 other phone calls that started the same way. So, and that my mother was, God bless her soul, probably one of the most difficult patients to date that I have ever witnessed in this
That's because she
process.
was your mom.
Yes, very, very difficult. And anyone who was around me at the time knows that I probably did not handle it half as well as I should have, but I did not have that therapeutic support for someone to say, this is a neurological impairment. You cannot reason with what's going on. And that's a big piece. Again, maybe another podcast for a different day. However, for these patients that are truly resistant, I think it's going to be dependent on each patient, the family dynamics, but getting them the diagnosis somehow is key. And then even in the therapeutic sense, bringing in sometimes even the physical therapist to come and do some exercise just to get used to the idea of someone else coming into the home outside of a family member is key. And we've had patients that have had to be on caseload for 2, 3 years with a physical therapist because there is no shame in going to the gym and doing some exercise, even though there's a little balance issue. There's a lot less of a stigma of having that person come in than in a cognitive therapist, which is why we call it Brain Boost. So oftentimes it takes 2 or 3 years sometimes for buy-in just to have that initial support. But once we have that initial support, they're in our ecosystem and we can support the patient as well as we can through the means we can until they're on board fully. Yeah.
Right. So it's like taking those baby steps, addressing the issue and getting compliance from the family and from the patient.
And I think in most situations, if it doesn't work, a lot of healthcare professionals are very keen to say, they said no, and that's the end of it. But that leaves the caregiver deficient of help and feeling very overwhelmed and defeated. And so if we address it a different way and say, this may take some time, let's step one, just get your loved one used to the idea of having someone else in the home outside of family, even if it's just physical therapy. Believe it or not, this is a big win. And it may take time, but I'll be honest with you, it
Yeah,
works.
I agree with what you're saying. So, if someone today who's listening is noticing the cognitive changes, and I may be beating a dead horse on here, but I really want to drive this point home in themselves or a loved one, what message of hope or encouragement would you want to leave them with?
Would like to leave them with the fact that our company, myself, taking a lot of these calls in addition to my team, we are here to help. It can be a confidential call. There is no 100% you're going to get enrolled and you have to do therapy. Just know that there are people out there, myself included, who provide resources and support without any strings attached, without stamping a diagnosis to anyone's chart, just to have that conversation on what are the next steps. Sometimes I've had people call from the community and call intermittently for years before they take any action on what's coming. And it's just nice for them to know, what do I do next, without feeling like they're going to be called out, caught, discredited in some way. Just know that there are steps that you can take that are safe and confidential.
Thank you for sharing that. I would like to just recap real quickly and give our audience a few takeaway points here. Today's conversation reminds us all of something incredibly important, especially for women who are entering their encore years and whether they're trying to do what they can because maybe their genetics. My dad had Alzheimer's for 9 years. I have life intentionally and with a purpose and moving forward, learning how to edit a podcast at 67 years old so that I can keep myself cognitively stimulated. The whole point here is that whatever we decide to do, we know that a cognitive diagnosis is not the end of the story. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. And I actually would say this as well. You made a very good point that, for as this podcast is really developed for women 55 and older, I'm going to turn the table a little bit and say, not only is it good for those who may have some awareness of some cognitive deficits, but I myself am entering the age of 50 sometime this year, as I call it, not 49. And my passion and my encore has really pivoted from being a physical therapist to taking some of the real challenges I've had in my life with my parents and pouring my passion into that. And the outcome has been the cognitive rehabilitation program that we've developed through Gait Mechanics. And to be very honest, if anyone said years ago what I was doing, I would have no idea how I got here and why I did this. So not only am I a member, but I'm also a client. Not only am I, working with people who are in their encore careers, this is part of my encore, and I have lived this with intention and purpose. And this is the road it's taken me. So I can look at this both ways and say it's just been an interesting journey all around.
Thank you for sharing that. And I hope that provides women out there with encouragement, those women who feel, oh, I'm too old for that. I can't possibly start something new. Here we are, both examples of experiencing kind of a pivot based on our life experiences. And there's nothing like feeling fulfilled. I'm sure you do as well. I can feel the passion when you talk about what you do. And you took those PT skills that you've had and you've identified an area, you have personal experience and you did the research and you talk just like a speech pathologist. So God bless you. I don't know if that's a good
I
thing
think
or
that is
not.
a compliment.
And whatever. But anyway, so to go on with our takeaway points here, I appreciate the fact that you challenge us to rethink what cognitive care can and should look like, not simply reacting to decline, but proactively supporting independence, dignity, engagement, and quality of life for as long as possible. Takeaway number 2, early support matters. Do you agree with that one?
100% I do, yes.
Okay. And waiting for a significant decline may limit opportunities to maintain skills and function at the highest level of independence. I think that was always the thing that I would say to people is just maintaining the highest level of independence and quality of life possible. The next one, the third one, is cognitive wellness involves more than memory, movement, coordination, so on and so forth. You spoke to that earlier. I think that's a huge takeaway. What do you think, Dana?
Yes, I think we have to stop looking at this through the lens of name finding and word recall. I think it's not just short-term memory loss. I think that this spans a broader scope and we're missing it completely.
And caregivers need support too. Huge. Anything you want to say on that we haven't
Yes,
said
I
already,
think
really?
no, I just think that that is a big piece. Again, no matter what works for you individually. I mean, again, I'm a physical therapist. I'm a trained professional, and I'll leave you with this one small story before we close. But I had hired an aide to help my mother, and I thought I was doing this wonderful thing because we can only afford the aide to a certain part of the day. She would leave my mother a sandwich for dinner at 3 o'clock, and she would leave. And I thought, great, done. What I missed is that my mother no longer had the executive functioning to remember to eat the sandwich. And so when I came in the morning one day, I found it covered with ants. So there are so many pieces to this. We forget that these people are not who they were. And
Right.
sometimes we're just too close to it. We need that. We need support. So,
I'm just going to share real quick. I could remember leaving my parents' house. My dad, as I told you, had Alzheimer's. And I cried all the way home that night because I said to my dad, "Oh, come on, Dad. Yes, you do. You remember." And I cried all the way home saying, "Cindy, you know better. You're a professional." He doesn't remember, number one. But number two, as professionals, we are just too close. My patients' families would tell me, "Oh, you have so much patience with my mom." And I would say to them, "Yes, because she's not my mother," which is so true. And takeaway, number 4, there is still life after a diagnosis, such as MCI. There's a lot of hope, connection, laughter, purpose, and meaningful moments do not disappear because cognitive changes begin.
I agree with that. I think that that's the big piece is we can't discard our patients and our loved ones just because of this diagnosis. We have to allow them, as you mentioned, the maximum ability to function independently and to have the best quality of life possible. So I think we have to really steer away from they're 85, what do you expect? I think the answer in all of these questions is we expect better, and now we will demand better.
I love that. We will expect better, and now we demand better. I love that. Absolutely. And our last takeaway for today is we need better communication and conversations around aging and brain health. Focus not only on decline, but on support, intervention, dignity, and quality of life. What are your final thoughts, Dana?
I think that we are all heading in the right direction. And the big piece is that this dignity and quality of life, it takes a village. So I'm in my little tiny piece, but if we're all doing our part, the outcome is amazing.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Beyond the Glass Slipper. This is the Encore Expert Series, and I can't thank Dana enough for all the insight provided. Share this with a friend who may need to hear it. And thank you again, Dana.
Thank you, Cindy.
Today's episode is part of our Encore Expert Series, and Dana Serrano is joining us to provide insight into a topic that falls squarely within pillar number 3, mental health and cognitive wellness. While the focus may feel a little different from some of our previous conversations, it fits beautifully within our mission at Beyond the Glass Slipper. Sometimes cognitive wellness means learning new skills, staying curious, finding purpose, building community, and challenging our brains in meaningful ways. Other times, it means having the courage to recognize changes that should not be ignored and deserves your attention. Taking action early is critical. Whether you are navigating cognitive changes yourself or supporting someone you love, I hope today's conversation leaves you with at least One important message: a diagnosis is not the end of the story. There is hope, there are resources, there are professionals who can help, and there are often far more options available than many families realize. The earlier concerns are addressed, the more opportunities there may be to support independence, dignity, and quality of life. You can find information about Dana and how to contact Gait Mechanics in today's show notes. If today's episode resonated with you in any way, please share it with someone who may benefit. Be sure to watch our episodes on YouTube and Spotify, and it is always greatly appreciated when you follow and like us on social media. If you're looking for a community of like-minded women committed to living intentionally, supporting one another, and embracing what comes next, I invite you to join us inside the Encore Women's Circle through the Connect page on our website at beyondtheglassslipper.com. Until next time, embrace your Encore and always remember to stay curious.